Please welcome Axios senior business reporter, Hope King.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Oh, it's taking everything for me not to dance right now because our next segment is going to be so fun. We have a limited amount of time, so I want to bring them straight up. Please welcome to the stage Michael Huppe, the president and CEO of SoundExchange, and Fitz from Fitz and the Tantrums. Give it up. Good to see you. Welcome. Welcome. I also promised myself I wouldn't do any puns with the songs, but we did make them clap. So good job, audience. We're well on our way. So the goal of our conversation today, I hope, is to bring people into the process of creating music, distributing music, and ultimately making a living from music, because I think so many of us enjoy music but don't really understand how it's made. So I want to kind of break down the supply chain of music and then also talk about how consumers ultimately feel when more AI might be incorporated. 15 years now, right? Along this journey, 5 albums, you have a solo album out now. You've talked about how when you write for an album, sometimes it takes you, 80, 90 songs, and then you kind of throw a lot out and then you cull it back down and you get burned out. And so maybe AI could help you. Talk about where AI could fit in your own journey of creating music.
Right, I mean, obviously it's the buzzword of this year. I think myself, like everybody else, has dabbled in the chat GPTs and the other things to sort of investigate how, I think for a lot of musicians, it's like, how real is the threat? Mm-hmm. You know, and so I sat there one day. My least favorite part of making music is diving into the minutia of all the lyrics. So I went on ChatGPT and I said, you know, write me a song with this as the title. And most of what I got back was pretty bad. And then I think as like everybody else, it's really about the detail of your prompt, right? And the only time that I was able to really get something that felt like a legitimate lyric was if I prompted it to write in the style of a specific artist. And that was the only time that I got stanzas back that I was like, that seems like that could be actually something real. And I think, you know, we're all trying to figure out what this means for all of us now, and especially in the music world. How can we use it as a useful tool in the way that we use Pro Tools or Ableton or any of these things? You know, I spend a lot of my time writing songs with professional songwriters. I love working with them because they love to revise. They love to get into, let's make this song better and better and better. And so I sort of in one day sort of approached thinking of the AI as one more songwriter in the room. And what's great about collaboration when you're writing songwriting with songwriters in a room is, you know, you might write the first 3 great lyrics and you can't finish that fourth line. And when you have multiple people in the room, hopefully the other person's coming up with the 4th line, the 5th line, or whatever. And so I tried to do an experiment where I was writing lyrics, and every time I would get stumped, I would go to the chat GPT or whatever program I was using, and I would input what the lyric was that I was doing so far. I would indicate, please rhyme, continue my rhyme scheme. And I'd say 1 out of every 5 ideas felt like a legitimate idea that you could use. Or could feel good enough to stand muster.
Did you put your own name or your band in there as the style for it to mimic?
It was the first thing I did.
Yeah,
I was like, I'll never have to write another song in my life.
So how good
It was not good.
Okay.
It was not good. And then I was like, wait, is my music just not good? Could be.
So you're not worried yet. Mike, you talk to artists all the time. I'm always curious, like, what's going on in those group chats? Is AI a big topic? Are you hearing similar stories to the one that Fitz just shared, that they're trying ChatGPT out now, or it's been a year now that it's been taking over sort of all of our mind share?
Yeah, you know, as Fitz was saying, it's this, you know, it's a tricky thing, like you've heard all morning today, right? There's great potential, but there's also concern about making sure it's deployed properly. So a lot of the artists you talk to, and not just artists, but people in the whole production chain, producers and songwriters and labels and, they're all interested in how do we lean into this? Because there's a lot of really interesting things AI can do that some of them are just helping with the production that already happens. But let me give you a couple of examples that I've read about lately. I think of, music resurrection, I call it. How many people here know that the Beatles, a couple weeks ago, just dropped their last record? Ironically named Now and Then, by the way. And they because they took some old John Lennon tracks, cleaned them up with AI. You have the example of Timbaland, who always wanted to record with Biggie Smalls. He never could, one of his icons. But now he's able to do that because AI can bring that to life. Or there are other examples of artists who've been in car accidents and their vocal cords aren't working, and they can resurrect what they were before through AI. So all of these things are very exciting to the industry, but everything needs to follow what I call the 3 C's. You need consent, credit, and compensation. What the industry wants to say is, look, I'm interested in leaning into this. I'm interested in embracing this new technology, but let me participate. Make sure you're doing it with my permission.
Yeah.
Don't take my persona, my likeness, my voice without my permission.
So did you give ChatGPT permission to write songs? I mean, it's obviously taken what's already out there. How did that actually feel, though, when you saw the lyrics in front of you that it presumed you would be able to write if it was you at the keyboard?
Right. Well, when I gave it that objective.
And what was the prompt, by the way?
That prompt.
Yeah.
It brought to me this whole idea that I think we've really only seen with the visual medium so far, where there's obviously all of AI needs to have some sort of learning going on. And what are they learning off of? What is the data set that they are learning on? And I think we might already be past the point where we could even protect any of our intellectual property from being learned. I think it's already consumed every piece of music out there in the world, whether we've given that permission or not. And the question is going to be, can we even decipher, did it use my music, my catalog of intellectual property to teach it? When I gave it that prompt to say, write a song, was it going and scanning every song that I've ever released to understand what that model was? And therefore, in the same way that the Getty Images of the world are bringing lawsuits against AI saying your program learned these images off of our catalog, we never gave you consent. Do we even have that opportunity as musicians to go raise a red flag, or did that happen 3 years ago and the cat's out of the bag already?
You're at the table with the streaming platforms. You are in touch with companies that ultimately can control the algorithms, to a certain extent of which songs are being floated up to people's playlists. You talked recently about a fear of yours, which is that AI, if you generate music with it, could be more cheaply produced, and therefore streaming platforms could push those songs over an original one that Fitz toiled over, and that would shift the dynamics of the economics so significantly. What can actually be done, though, to draw those distinct boundaries to protect artists from being a victim, really, of those algorithms?
Right, and that's a very great point. We all know that the music being uploaded to these platforms is immense, 100,000 tracks a day to some of them. And if some of that music is artificially created or lower quality music, maybe it's white noise, maybe it's nature sounds, maybe it's just music that's owned by that platform. And if they're able to steer even a little bit of the streaming to stuff that they own, it lowers the royalty load. So I think what we need to do, what's important, we all agree that AI is not going away, right? AI is here. We have to figure out how to live with it. And I will say, I think the industry, I think Congress, I think stakeholders are engaging quicker than they ever have. And for AI to properly participate in our culture, in the world, we must develop a way where the immense wealth that is going to be created by these companies is properly shared down to the creators on the foundation, on whose foundation they're building their companies. And I don't just mean, great artists, like we have here next to me, but authors and, photographers and all sorts of creative work that goes into the basis of these companies. the wealth that's created needs to trickle down to the people who form that foundation.
How confident are you, Fitz, that there are enough people out there vouching for you and advocating for you at the right tables?
I think that there are people like Mike and SoundExchange, but ultimately I'm not even sure that we can put the genie back in the bottle. I don't know if these AI models have already learned from all of the music that's ever been created in the world. How do I even delineate any of that or know whether my music's been used as a source of inspiration to create an AI-generated idea?
Let's say Mike has a magic wand to control that genie in the bottle.
Oh, I like this question.
Where would the two of you work together to draw the boundaries to protect your style, your authenticity, which is the word of the year, according to Merriam-Webster now, which we can talk about.
Authenticity?
Authenticity.
I hope it's
what we're all striving for. But really though, where would those boundaries be drawn? Where would you like them to be drawn so that you feel confident that you're being paid for fairly, that platforms are taking into consideration how much work AI might be involved, and where do you really think they'll listen? Because again, conflicting incentives.
One thing that we could talk about is there's things that are being talked about in policy shops and elsewhere. Do you have you put certain responsibilities on the platforms to demarcate what has AI, what doesn't? Maybe you add mandatory flags to a file that incorporates AI. And I think it's also, there may develop a marketplace. So SoundExchange and several other organizations, not just in the music industry, are part of something called the Human Artistry Campaign, which recognizes the value of this new technology, but also recognizes the importance of human input. It's very tough I don't think AI is yet at the point where it can capture all the nuance and complexity of the human condition and put it into art. That's why you're not getting the great lyrics, at least not yet, that Fitz was talking about. But it would be nice if there started to develop a market where, so for years now, people have been buying, diamonds that don't come from embattled.
Manufactured diamonds,
or
right.
Clothes that are not manufactured by child laborers in a faraway port. Wouldn't it be nice if there were platforms that started to say, we're a human platform, this is human music. If you want to hear genuine, authentic, word of the year?
Yes.
Authentic human creations, come to us.
If a song is written in part by AI, should those that made the song get paid out less? And who gets paid the AI's share of the pie?
Well, we were just talking about this, and I'm not sure they've even delineated what the percentage of human input is required to gain a copyright on an intellectual property. I think, Mike, you said that there has to be a human hand somewhere involved in it. What percentage? And at that point, I'm also like, is tapping the keystrokes enough of a human involvement to gain that intellectual property?
These are the gray areas that, it's pretty clear under US law that if there's something that lacks human involvement altogether, no copyright attaches. So for instance, imagine if you had a business model where you want to pump out 100 million tracks of 100% AI product. Ironically, you can't protect that product, and somebody else can come and rip it off because there's no copyright.
But my question to you, Mike, is that enforceable? Or is that honor system based?
Well, it could be enforceable, if you end up having a copyright infringement lawsuit, and there would have to be proof about what was the input, what was not the input. However, to your point, doing it, where there's a platform with 80 million works on it gets a little bit trickier. But exactly what level of input is required, that's the gray area. And, and whatever that level is, the only part that's protected in the US is human. Now, is the human part. Now, importantly, that's not a global standard.
Right.
We do not think that all countries will follow that, and that is a glaring problem to the policymakers in the room interested in US copyright law. I would say we need to hold the line. The U.S. is a huge, intellectual property is has always been, recently been one of our biggest parts of GDP. It's one of our biggest exports. People know us abroad for our games, our music, our movies, and the U.S. needs to hold the line on some of these things and not rush to the lowest common denominator around the globe.
I know we're in the gray area, but I like to be black and white. I wear black and white. Your hair is black and white. Let's be black and white.
You don't like red?
If Fitz used 2 minutes of his time to write his next song, does he get 2% less of his song going forward? Should he?
That's unanswered.
But no, I'm asking you what you think.
But I'm not wearing black and white. I think that's a difficult question because, how do you divide value when you have something that's the collective work of a bunch of different inputs? In one case, the songwriter's input may be 90% of something, in another case it might be 20%. I think it's hard to come up with a flat rule about which parts of a creation merit the value division.
I don't know, Fitz, what do you think about that answer?
I don't know the answer to the question either. Ultimately, let's say 10% of a song is AI generated. Where does that, and we say, okay, that's not for the artist, where does that money go? Does that go to the company that created the platform? Or do we create some sort of public fund that says the AI part goes back into a pool that helps for the artist to have legal representation or whatever it is? Does it go back into sort of a collective pool to help us all navigate this world? How does it work? Even for songwriters in the room, we'll have at different points with different artists or different songwriters, there'll be discrepancies on what people believe the splits should be amongst humans as well. So,
and to your question, the other reason it's a tricky question, I'm not even clear exactly what you mean by AI input. So AI is actually not as new as everybody thinks. I think Brian Eno back in 1996.
Yes, 1957. There was a song.
Yeah.
But just wait. But your ChatGPT was trained on you. So technically, you should get the entire sum right because that prompt was based on
right.
Your
But
data.
if I'm in my bedroom in Wichita, Kansas, or wherever, and I use Fitz and the Tantrums as my inspiration for my prompt, and it gives me a thing, how am I going to know that kid used my catalog as his inspiration? Is there some sort of digital thread? Is there a blockchain or something that holds that information in perpetuity that anybody else can go and say, here's this lyric, but then at the same time, it's not uncommon for humans to write the same lyric. I thought I had coined this phrase FOMO and then found out that I wasn't the only person that had created that 15 years ago in my mind. When I Googled it, it was like, oh no, it's already there.
Yeah, blockchain got a chuckle. Just lastly, Napster shut down over 20 years ago. You started at RIAA around the same time. What mistakes should we avoid at this point in time to avoid sort of the Napster second coming?
That's a great question, and I think that's a reason to be kind of optimistic about this issue. If you look when Napster happened in 1999, 2000, the next 10 to 15 years were a series of battles and fights in courts and long drawn out, attempts to address issues. What is comforting to me anyway about the current situation with AI, look how quickly, it wasn't on anybody's radar before last November.
Yeah.
And look how quickly you have not only Congress and policymakers, but you have, creators and experimenting with it. You have people leaning into it. You have record labels and publishers and photography shops licensing these entities. So I think we've learned from back then, like I said up top, it's important to lean into this and try to, be productive and make something out of it. Again, being mindful that at the end of the day, it's all got to be done with consent, credit, and compensation. As long as creators are given their due and have a seat at the table, I think there's reason to be optimistic going forward that we'll figure this out.
Fitz, are you writing a song about AI?
Not yet, but after today.
Yeah. Well, we know it's a smaller crowd than you usually are used to. Fitz, thank you so much for joining us. And Michael, we know Fitz will keep you on track with those conversations. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Michael Huppe and Fitz from Fitz and the Tantrums, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.